Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the very reason life has felt heavier, harder, and more hidden lately is because you've been chosen? Not forgotten, not overlooked, chosen. And what if everything you've been through, the silence, the struggle, the isolation, wasn't a detour, but the proving ground for something greater? Because now God is about to reveal why He picked you. And when He does, even your past will make sense. God's choice is often a paradox to the human mind. We expect Him to choose the strong, the gifted, the noble by earthly standards. We imagine His favor as something reserved for the polished, the powerful, or the prepared. But in truth, the mystery of divine selection runs contrary to the wisdom of the world. The ones God calls are not always the ones man would consider worthy. He selects not by appearance or achievement, but by purpose. It is not the vessel's outward strength that makes it useful in the hand of the potter, but what He intends to shape it into. This truth can be unsettling. We live in a world that praises competence and rewards credentials. From childhood we are taught that being chosen, whether for a team, a job, or a position, means we have earned it. So when God whispers a calling into the heart of someone ordinary or seemingly unqualified, it jars the system. It confuses the mind, but it stirs the soul. God's choosing is not about who you are now, but who He will reveal Himself to be through you. Consider how often the Scriptures show us this divine contradiction. David, a shepherd boy forgotten in the field, is anointed king while still smelling of sheep. Moses, a stammering exile, is summoned to speak to Pharaoh. Mary, a young and obscure virgin, is overshadowed by the Spirit to carry the Savior of the world. Again and again, God bypasses the impressive and lays His hand on the overlooked. Not because the others had no skill, but because God's purpose is never to glorify flesh, but to reveal His own strength in human weakness. This is what makes divine choosing so profoundly humbling. It removes all ground for pride. No one may boast in being chosen. It is not a reward for righteousness nor a prize for perfection. It is grace pure and undeserved. It flows not from human effort, but from God's own desire to fulfill His purposes in the earth through fragile vessels. In choosing the weak, He makes room for His strength. In selecting the broken, He creates space for healing to shine. God does not require you to be perfect to be chosen. In fact, your very imperfections may be what qualify you in His eyes, for they leave room for dependence. What He looks for is not a flawless performance, but a yielded heart, a soul willing to say, yes, even when it trembles. A person who can carry his assignment with reverence, knowing they are unworthy in themselves, but made capable by His grace. To be chosen by God is not merely to be invited into a task, it is to be drawn into intimacy. It means that God, who sees the end from the beginning, has written you into His design, not for your name to be made great, but for His glory to be made known. You are not a pawn in a distant plan, you are a participant in a story that has eternal meaning. His choosing of you is a declaration that your life matters beyond the borders of time. You have been called according to purpose, and that purpose is bigger than applause, position, or profit. Yet, the calling is not always accompanied by clarity. Often you will not understand why He chose you, especially when others seem more equipped. You will ask, why me? And the silence may linger. But the silence is not absence. It is the pause before a revelation. God does not owe explanations to the ones He chooses. He offers trust. He does not promise ease, but He assures presence. The mistake we make is trying to evaluate our value through the lens of human comparison. We assume God's choice must follow human logic, but God sees with eternal eyes. He calls not because of what is visible now, but because of what He knows He can bring forth. He does not merely see you as you are, He sees what you are becoming. He chooses the seed, not the flower. So when God chooses, it is not to flatter, but to fulfill. It is not to elevate one above another, but to accomplish a work that only he fully understands. His choosing is purposeful, intentional, and deeply personal. You may not feel worthy, but that has never been the measure. It has always been about the one who calls, not the one who is called. And in that truth, there is both humility and hope. When God chooses someone, he does not place them on a pedestal and parade them before the world. Instead, he often leads them into trials, difficulties, and places of deep testing. This is not a punishment, but a preparation. The chosen are not simply called to a title, they are called to carry something sacred. And the weight of that calling must be matched with strength, endurance, and spiritual maturity. Such qualities are not inherited or imitated, they are forged. And the forge of the chosen is trial. Many people associate being chosen with ease, honor, or favor in the eyes of others. They expect open doors, quick results, and smooth paths. But when the path wins through pain, obscurity, or waiting, doubt begins to whisper. The heart wonders whether it was really chosen at all. Yet it is in these very moments when everything is stripped away that the truth of the calling is revealed. God does not call people to comfort, he calls them to transformation. And transformation always involves fire. The wilderness has always been the classroom of God's chosen ones. In the wilderness, the noise of the world is silenced, and the soul is confronted with its own frailty. The distractions that once provided false strength are removed. What remains is a raw dependence on God. It is in this place that identity is refined and faith is made genuine. The proving ground of the chosen is never the applause of men, but the silence of the unseen places. There, character is formed, motives are purified, and the voice of God becomes unmistakable. Trials are not incidental to the calling, they are essential to it. What is tested becomes trustworthy. A soldier is not trusted on the battlefield until he has trained in hardship. A bridge is not crossed until it has borne weight without breaking. In the same way, those whom God chooses must first be tested, not because God is unsure of them, but because they must become sure of Him. They must learn that their strength lies not in themselves, but in the one who called them. In the fire of trial, the chosen one meets their own limits. They come to the end of their cleverness, their confidence, even their spiritual pride. They are brought low, and in that low place they discover the strength of God. The testing strips away illusions and replaces them with truth. It reveals whether they love the calling more than the caller, or whether they are willing to be faithful even when the promise feels far away. The chosen are shaped not in the sunlight of comfort, but in the shadows where no one else sees. God's method of proving is not to show the world the chosen one's strength, but to display His own faithfulness in the midst of their weakness. Trials become the stage where God shows Himself strong, and though the process is painful, it is also profoundly intimate. There are aspects of God's nature that can only be learned in trial: His comfort in sorrow, His nearness in brokenness, His guidance in confusion. These are not taught through sermons or books, but through walking with Him in the valley. When God allows testing, He is not being cruel, He is being intentional. Every struggle has a purpose, every silence a reason. He is building in the chosen one a resilience that cannot be shaken, a wisdom that cannot be borrowed, and a faith that cannot be faked. These qualities will be needed later when the calling comes into full bloom. For those who are to carry great light must have first known great darkness. Otherwise, the weight of the assignment would crush them. The chosen are not exempt from suffering, they are often acquainted with it more deeply than most. But their suffering is never wasted. It becomes a testimony, a well of strength, a source of authority. Because they have walked through fire and come out with God's presence instead of bitterness, they become vessels of hope for others. Their scars become signs of survival, and more than survival, transformation. Being chosen means being set apart, not just for purpose, but for process. It is a path of refinement that removes the unnecessary and sharpens what remains. And the forge of the chosen is never a place of defeat, it is a place of becoming. What feels like loss is often the precise place where true strength is born. What seems like delay is often the final stage of divine preparation. The trial is not the end of the chosen, it is where the chosen are made ready. To be chosen by God is often misunderstood as immediate promotion, celebration, or success. Yet those who are truly called soon realize that being chosen carries a weight before it brings honor. It demands more from a person than it gives, at least at first. There is a burden attached to being set apart, a heaviness that often precedes the blessing. And it is in this early stage, when the promise is not yet visible and the cost is painfully real, that many falter or question the calling altogether. The burden of being chosen is not always external. It is internal, a quiet but constant awareness that you cannot live like everyone else. There is a sacred discomfort that settles into the heart of the one who has been marked by purpose. They feel it when others compromise easily, and they cannot. They sense it when they are drawn to solitude while others seek crowds. They notice it in the restlessness that won't let them settle for the shallow. It is as if their soul knows something their mind has not yet fully grasped, that they are carrying something holy, even if they don't understand it yet. This weight is not the result of fear or pressure, but of spiritual responsibility. God entrusts those he calls with an invisible assignment, and though the fullness of it is still in the future, the shaping begins immediately. There is a stripping away that occurs, a refining that removes the unnecessary. Relationships may shift, opportunities may dry up, doors may close, not as punishment, but as divine pruning. The burden of being chosen often includes isolation, not because one is unloved, but because God is drawing them closer to himself. It is in the quiet, sometimes lonely places, that the roots of purpose are driven deep. The world may not understand this process. People may interpret it as failure or confusion. They may wonder why someone with so much potential is hidden away. But heaven sees differently. In God's economy, the crown is always preceded by the cross. The pattern of Scripture reveals that before there is elevation, there is often a season of emptiness. Before there is influence, there is usually obscurity. Before the blessing of being used, there is the burden of being refined. Those who are chosen are given assignments that require more than talent. They demand character, perseverance, and trust. And these qualities are not instant, they are grown through tension. When someone is truly called, they often face inner battles that no one sees. They wrestle with doubts, with identity, with obedience. They may feel the weight of responsibility long before the reward of fruitfulness. This is because God is forming them into vessels that can carry what he has planned without breaking under the pressure or becoming proud from the visibility. Being chosen often means you are trusted with pain that others may never have to carry. You are trusted with the burden of vision before its fulfillment. You are asked to walk with God when no one is clapping, when the path is unclear, when obedience costs something real. There are moments when you will feel misunderstood, even by those closest to you. Moments when you question whether you heard God at all. But even in those moments, there remains a flicker of conviction deep within, a knowing that you cannot turn back, because something eternal has touched your life. What makes the burden so heavy is not simply the weight of what is coming, but the tension of the in-between. You are no longer who you used to be, but not yet who you are becoming. You can sense the future, but you are living in the silence of the present. The calling is real, but so is the waiting. And it is in this tension that the heart is trained to trust not in outcomes, but in the one who calls. God, in his wisdom, never rushes this process. He allows the burden to do its work. It humbles. It clarifies. It teaches dependence. Eventually, the burden becomes the very thing that prepares you for the blessing. It ensures that when the moment of unveiling comes, you are not just gifted, but grounded. You are not only anointed, but aligned. The burden has made you ready, even when it felt like it was breaking you. This is the hidden cost of being chosen, not seen in public, but felt in private. And though it may feel like a delay, it is a divine mercy. For what God is preparing through the burden is not just the fulfillment of a calling, but the formation of a person who can walk in it with humility, integrity, and endurance. Opposition is often misunderstood. Many assume that resistance is a sign they are on the wrong path, that hardship or spiritual attack means they have missed God. But the opposite is frequently true. The very presence of opposition is often the clearest confirmation that a person is walking toward purpose. Hell does not waste its strength on those who are harmless. The adversary does not fear the complacent. He fears the ones who are carrying something that threatens his domain. And so, when God chooses someone, opposition rises not in spite of their calling, but because of it. This pattern is woven throughout the fabric of Scripture. From the moment Joseph dreamed, he was targeted. His own brothers hated him, not because he had done wrong, but because he carried a glimpse of something greater. His dreams stirred jealousy, but more than that, they revealed a destiny that darkness sought to prevent. His journey from the pit to the palace was not smooth. It was filled with betrayal, false accusation, and waiting. And yet, none of the opposition could cancel what God had ordained. In fact, it only served to prepare him for what he had seen. This is the paradox of purpose. The greater the assignment, the more intense the resistance. Spiritual warfare does not surround those who are idle. It surrounds those who are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. The chosen often find themselves in battles they didn't start, attacked for reasons they don't understand, opposed by forces they cannot see. The weight of the resistance is often in proportion to the weight of the calling. If you feel like you are under attack, it may not be a sign of failure. It may be the clearest evidence that you are marked for something more. Opposition also has a refining purpose. It reveals what is within you. It exposes fears that must be faced, wounds that must be healed, and dependencies that must be surrendered. The pressure of opposition has a way of forcing out what is false and strengthening what is true. Those who are never resisted may never grow, but those who are pressed must decide, will they fold or will they rise? This decision, made again and again in the face of difficulty, is part of what shapes the chosen into vessels of endurance and wisdom. Moreover, God uses opposition to train the heart to trust. When everything is easy, the soul becomes casual. But in the fire of resistance, trust must become intentional. It is no longer an idea, it is a choice made in darkness, against fear without proof. Faith is proven not in comfort but in conflict. The opposition becomes a classroom where the chosen learn to walk by faith and not by sight. And though it is painful, it produces strength that cannot be shaken by the applause or criticism of others. It is important to understand that opposition does not always come dressed as evil. Sometimes it wears the face of familiarity. It can come through people who mean well, or those who feel threatened by your growth. The enemy is subtle, and he often uses the voices closest to us to sow doubt, discouragement, or distraction. But those who are chosen must learn to recognize this and continue forward with clarity. They must develop spiritual discernment, the ability to hear God's voice above every other. And they must learn not to be driven by the need for understanding, but by the need for obedience. Being opposed does not mean being abandoned. In fact, God is often most present in the very place where resistance is fiercest. He walks with his chosen through the fire, not always removing the flames, but preserving them in the midst of it. The miracle is not always in the escape. Sometimes it is in the endurance. And that endurance becomes a testimony that carries more weight than any immediate victory. What you survive becomes part of the message you carry, and that message has power because it has been lived. There is also something about opposition that exposes the enemy's fear. If he fights you, it's because he sees what you do not yet fully see. He has glimpsed what you are becoming, and he hopes to stop it before it matures. But his resistance, while real, cannot override God's choosing. The opposition may delay, distract, or discourage, but it cannot destroy what God has spoken. In fact, the resistance can become the very thing that strengthens your resolve, confirms your direction, and sharpens your focus. Opposition is not the enemy of the chosen, it is part of their journey. It does not mean God has changed his mind. It means the enemy knows God is serious. And if you find yourself walking through resistance, you are likely walking straight toward your destiny. When God chooses someone, He does not only call them to act, He calls them to see differently. The chosen are given a vision, and that vision is both a gift and a burden. It sets them apart, not only in action but in perspective. While others may be satisfied with what is, the chosen are stirred by what could be. They are haunted by glimpses of a future not yet seen, a possibility placed in their spirit long before it manifests in reality. This vision is not always welcomed by others. It challenges norms, disrupts comfort, and unsettles complacency. But to the chosen, it becomes a quiet fire within a driving force that keeps them moving, even when the way is unclear. The nature of vision is often lonely. It isolates before it connects. The one who sees differently cannot always explain what they see. Language often fails to capture what the spirit knows. There are dreams too fragile for the ears of cynicism, callings too sacred for casual conversation. And so the chosen learn to carry their vision in silence, cradling it like a seed that must be hidden before it grows. There is pain in this. The longing to be understood, to be affirmed, to be supported is real. But the weight of the calling requires more than approval, it requires faith. Vision is not simply ambition dressed in religious words. It is a spiritual knowing, a clarity that often contradicts circumstances. It allows the chosen to walk through barren places and still speak of abundance. It enables them to face rejection and still remain faithful. Because vision is not rooted in what is seen with natural eyes, but in what is discerned by the Spirit. The chosen are not driven by what is, but by what God has whispered to their soul. And that whisper is more enduring than any outward evidence. Those who are chosen must learn how to steward vision. It cannot be rushed or forced. It must be guarded from discouragement, nourished with prayer, and refined through time. There is always a temptation to try to prove the vision, to show people early results, to gain quick validation. But the vision matures not in display, but in surrender. It grows stronger in the hidden places, where the soil of waiting softens the heart and the rain of uncertainty deepens the roots. The chosen must trust that what God has revealed will come to pass, even when every external sign says otherwise. Often vision becomes a weight before it becomes a reward. It stretches the heart beyond its comfort. It creates an internal tension, a pull towards something unseen that makes normal life feel too small. The chosen live with a kind of holy dissatisfaction, not because they are ungrateful, but because they know they were made for more. They are unable to settle, even when settling would be easier. This restlessness is not rebellion, it is the stirring of destiny. It is God refusing to let them go back to what they were never meant to remain. Sometimes the vision seems delayed, even denied. The gap between what is promised and what is present can feel endless. But this is not failure, it is formation. God allows the vision to test the heart, to see if the chosen will remain faithful when there is no evidence, if they will still believe when nothing around them agrees. Vision has a refining power. It reveals idols, strips away ego, and confronts impatience. What remains is a person who trusts not only in what God has shown, but in God Himself. The vision is never just about the individual. God never gives vision simply to elevate a person. It is always meant to serve others, to glorify Him, to bring light to places of darkness. The chosen must be careful not to worship the vision, but to remain aligned with the one who gave it. When the vision becomes more important than the presence of God, it ceases to be holy. But when the chosen stay near to Him, the vision will unfold with clarity, strength, and purpose. It will outlast opposition, outshine doubt, and overflow with impact. Carrying vision means carrying responsibility. It means walking differently, choosing obedience over convenience, and refusing to let go even when it would be easier to walk away. It is not always rewarded in the beginning. It is not always recognized, but it is real. And it will speak at the right time, not with noise, but with fruit. When God finally begins to reveal why he chose you, the unveiling rarely looks like a grand announcement. It often begins quietly, subtly, with moments that don't immediately appear supernatural. But there's a shift, a divine turn, where things that were once out of reach begin to align, and circumstances start to echo what he whispered to your heart long ago. The weight begins to make sense. The pain begins to show purpose. The long nights of silence become the very soil in which the fruit of your calling begins to bloom. God doesn't forget who he chooses. He doesn't abandon what he begins. He simply prepares in silence what he intends to reveal in power. There comes a moment when the invisible calling becomes visible. Doors that were previously locked without reason begin to open. Favor begins to follow you into places that once ignored your presence. You speak and people now listen. You move, and the ground beneath your feet seems to respond. It's not magic, nor is it manipulation. It is divine timing. It is the fulfillment of quiet promises made in secret between you and God, now manifesting in front of those who once doubted you and those who never saw you coming. This is when God begins to prove why he chose you. He doesn't do it through vengeance or noise. He does it through fruit. Fruit that grows from the very branches others once thought were dead. Fruit that cannot be denied, even by those who tried to cut you down. God is not interested in empty vindication. He's interested in testimony. And your life, once marked by waiting, rejection, and obscurity, begins to carry undeniable evidence of divine intention. Not manufactured success, but the kind of favor that can't be explained apart from him. God proving why he chose you is not just about platform or recognition. It's about impact. Suddenly, people are helped by your story. They are healed by your scars. What once embarrassed you becomes the very thing that empowers others. The seasons that nearly broke you become tools of breakthrough for someone else. The isolation that once made you cry becomes the training ground that now helps you lead. Your words carry weight. Your presence shifts rooms. Not because you have changed yourself, but because you have been changed by the process. In this season, what others saw as strange or unnecessary in your journey becomes sacred. The things you were ashamed of, the parts of the path you tried to hide, God begins to highlight those very details to bring glory to himself. The mess becomes the message. The delay becomes the development. And people who once overlooked you are now drawn to what you carry. Not because you've become someone else, but because you've become fully who you were meant to be. God also proves why he chose you by giving you influence that doesn't need to be forced. You no longer have to push for attention, approval, or space. The space begins to recognize you. The influence comes not because you fought for it, but because you are now fit to carry it. You've been trained, not in public classrooms, but in private crucibles. And that training becomes evident not in pride or perfection, but in power under control, in wisdom shaped by wounds, in grace that flows from the grief you've overcome. This proving season is not about elevating you above others. It's about elevating his name through you. Those who are truly chosen never lose sight of the source. They know the journey too well to take the credit. They've seen their own weakness up close. They've walked through their own doubts and have been carried by a strength not their own. So when the moment comes when the spotlight finally finds them, they don't stand in it alone. They carry the weight of gratitude, of memory, of testimony. And though others may call it success, the chosen know it is sacred. It is not just the reward of endurance, it is the revelation of design. You were never forgotten. You were never overlooked. You were being prepared. And now, God is showing others what he always saw in you, not because he owes you, but because he is faithful, because he finishes what he starts, because his promises are yes and amen, even if they take longer than expected. When he proves why he chose you, it's never just about you. It's about legacy. It's about those who will rise because you didn't give up. It's about those who will believe because you held on. And it's about his glory revealed not through a perfect life, but through a surrendered one. So now, having walked through the wait, the waiting, the wounds, and the wonder you can see it clearly, being chosen was never just a title, it was a transformation. God didn't pick you because you were the strongest, loudest, or most visible. He picked you because he saw something eternal in you, something he placed there himself. The burden, the battles, the silence, the vision, the resistance, they were all part of the preparation, not punishment. And now, as God begins to unfold the evidence of his choosing, the world will witness what heaven always knew. You were set apart for a reason, not to impress, but to impact, not to be praised, but to be poured out. God is not just about to prove why he chose you, he's about to use your life as the answer to someone else's prayer. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them see that the choosing was never about you being ready, it was about God being faithful.